Alright, so there's a lot of stuff that ends up happening at the same time. The Toahaga try to track down Pterodax by putting Snake Zactan, Snacktan, if you will, in a fishbowl because he has some kind of connection to Makuta and they want to exploit that. The Shadowed One murders Ancient. Vizon gets a mask of interdimensional travel fused to his face, and Miserix becomes two-dimensional. I was debating about how to talk about this, and then I realized it all requires crucial context. It requires an understanding of how the Matoran universe works and what it is. I've been trying to figure out ways around addressing this because I keep putting it off because it's the ultimate spoiler to the Bionicle storyline. And I wanted to wait for the right moment to spoil it. But honestly, I think now is the time. So in the next couple videos, we're going to talk about the geography and the very nature of the Matoran universe itself. Some of you already know what's coming. Some of you don't. I'm excited for both of you in equal measure. We are indeed finally getting to that. So I've been constantly going like, oh, there are stars in this underground city, and then there's, is it really underground? And well, in order to explain it to you, I've come up with this helpful diagram. Alright, so this is about where Metru Nui and Mata Nui are. We already kind of know that they're more or less like on top of each other. This right here is the northern continent. We've really never talked about it because it doesn't come up. This is where the southern continent is. And then here you can see there's just a whole bunch of other islands, like Stelt is somewhere here, and so is Karzani, and then the Dark Hunters are over here somewhere, and then Artaka, I think, is over there. I might have that switched around, but anyway. The southern continent is kind of complicated because it also contains Voya Nui and Mari Nui. Karta Nui is directly underneath all of that. The geography of the southern continent and Voya Nui and Mari Nui is particularly confusing. It's because usually when we talk about geography, we don't talk about countries or continents being on top of each other. But here we are. Yeah, we'll get to that. I can't believe we're actually finally here. So like I was saying, the southern continent basically contains Voya Nui and Mari Nui, with Karta Nui directly underneath it. Or rather, I should say contained, past tense. And the reason I'm saying past tense is because during the Great Cataclysm, the chunk of the southern continent that was Voya Nui and Mari Nui just broke off. This is what created the giant hole in the southern continent, but it also created a giant hole in the dome over the southern continent. Yes, I said dome! Every single one of these islands and realms and continents is in its own dome. All of them except for Voya Nui, Mari Nui, and Mata Nui. We'll get to that last one. But alright, so all of these continent-sized domes are submerged under a gigantic ocean. So basically, as you can see here, Voya Nui and Mari Nui shot up through this dome, creating a hole in the dome and in the southern continent, which allowed a whole bunch of water to flow in. This also created a hole in the ceiling of the dome that Karta Nui is in. This is the gigantic waterfall that our very special boy Matoro fell down. So you basically have these like 4 layers of civilization. You have Voya Nui, and then you have Mari Nui, which broke off of Voya Nui a little later after the Great Cataclysm. Then you have the southern continent with this giant hole in it, and underneath that you have Karta Nui. But what's going on with Metru Nui and Mata Nui? Well, I can't believe I've been doing this for close to 2 years. So we talked about the southern continent. Now it's time to talk about Metru Nui and Mata Nui. So if you'll remember, Metru Nui and Mata Nui are connected to each other, and they're basically right on top of each other. There's essentially a large system of tunnels that connects the two islands to each other. The Toa Metru go through them at multiple points in the story. So Metru Nui exists in its own dome, and then Mata Nui basically sits right on top, on actual sea level. So Mata Nui and Voya Nui exist essentially on the same plane. The thing is, we know why Voya Nui exists, because of the Great Cataclysm. What's going on with Mata Nui? There's no, like, giant hole in the dome that the island shot out of. The island is ostensibly supposed to be there. So you might assume that Mata Nui is just this one natural island under which all of these domes are built, and you would be wrong. Mata Nui does not exist by accident. The purpose of Mata Nui's existence can be summed up in one word: camouflage. And you would assume, like, yeah, this is the one way that you can access this incredibly complex world of domes. You wouldn't want just random invaders coming in. Of course it needs to be camouflaged. And that makes sense, but it's not the whole picture. Because the truth of the matter is that all of these domes exist inside a giant, dormant robot. Yep. You heard me correctly. A giant, dormant robot. So here's the tea. Basically, Mata Nui is not just real. He is a giant robot that a bunch of other tiny little robots live inside of. And some of you are probably thinking, wow, that's insane. That robot must be the size of multiple continents. Yup. It is Warhammer 40k levels of sci-fi fuckery mixed in with a Shyamalanian plot twist of gargantuan proportions. And you want to know how this wee lass and a bunch of other kids found out about this in 2009? We got a video of the Mata Nui Island splitting open to reveal a gigantic face, followed by a multi-continent-sized robot rising out of the sea. It was the coolest thing I had ever seen in my life, and still kind of remains the coolest thing that I have ever seen in my life. That video actually still gives me chills. It's like really fucking cool. Now, some of you might be thinking, this seems kind of apropos nothing. Why the fuck is this happening now? Did we get any hints as to this? And the truth is that this was the plan from the very beginning, since 2001. And to understand why things are this way, we're gonna have to get a little meta and talk about a man named Christian Faber. Fair warning, in this next episode, I'm going to be talking a lot about cancer and chemotherapy, and if that's a difficult thing for you to hear about, you can skip this one. It doesn't impact the story at all. So once upon a time, in the far, far-off land of the 1990s, there existed a man named Christian Faber. In the 90s, Faber was suffering from a brain tumor, and he was going through chemotherapy to deal with it. If you've ever gone through chemo, or you know anybody who's gone through chemo, you know it's a really painful process, and he went through it for years. The thing is, Faber's a really creative guy, and he saw this pain that he was going through as an opportunity to express that creativity. And as he was going through this process, he started to imagine that the pills he was taking of the chemo were releasing tiny little soldiers into his body to fight off the cancer. These pills acted almost like canisters. And looking back with that context, you can really kind of see where all of this came together. Makuta is this shadowy presence in this beautiful world that's taking the natural order and just twisting it until there's nothing left. Makuta is the stand-in for both cancer and for death. But it goes even deeper than that. Consider the Toa fighting the Borok only to find out later that they were actually just mutant Matoran. The problem with chemotherapy, especially as it existed a couple of decades ago, is that while it's very effective at attacking tumors and stuff, it also tends to damage the actual immune system. The immune system will basically fight back against and be damaged by the chemotherapy. The Toa were basically fighting back against what was ostensibly a natural process. And then, of course, as the story develops, it becomes a much less, one-to-one situation regarding the cancer, but the core of it is still there, and it's been there since the beginning. Faber has regularly shown off some of the sketches that he made in 2001 of the Great Spirit Robot. I'm not exaggerating when I say that, a lot of this was planned from the very beginning. We should collectively start a conspiracy that Earth is just inside a giant robot. Let's talk about the anatomy of the Great Spirit Robot. Metru Nui is in the head and is basically the brain of the Great Spirit Robot. There's actually a lot of crap going on underneath the island. We'll get to that. The southern continent is right about here, and underneath that is Carta Nui. So Carta Nui, being referred to as the heart of the universe, is actually an entirely literal thing. Which I guess would make the southern continent the stomach or the lungs. I don't know. It's not one-to-one. That's not how it works. The Great Spirit Robot is essentially lying underneath the ocean like this. Just kind of chilling with an island on its face. Now, the keen observer may see this and think to themselves, why? Why does this giant robot exist? For what purpose was it built? And by whom? And we'll get to that, I promise. I'm saving that for a couple of episodes down the line, and the reasons why will become clear, I promise. God is just a massive Gundam. Let that sink in. So I think this big-ass revelation actually begs another pretty important question. Who knew? Who within the Bionicle universe was actually aware that they were just fucking around inside a giant robot? It would seem that the vast majority of characters have little to no idea of the truth. Okay, so to make his plans come to fruition, Pterodax had to know, and he found out through Mutron, who found out through Tren Krom. The thing is, it's also not entirely clear how much Mutron knew, because he was still eviscerated by the energy storm, and you would figure if he knew the nature of the universe, he would have known that that would happen. I should probably make a separate video about that, because I have some conspiracy theories. The Baraki at one point were going to try and overthrow the Great Spirit, so they must have had some idea as to what was going on. The Order of Mata Nui probably knows, because they wouldn't be able to really do their job without knowing the nature of the universe that they were protecting. But the question then also becomes, who in the Order knows how much? Oh, and this guy knows, but we'll get to that. My band just sold out a show. I'm super pumped. So the Great Spirit Robot has been brought back to life, and the Toa Nuva, along with everybody else who escaped Carta Nui, has made their way back to Metru Nui. There's a tremendous celebration in the Colosseum. Turaga begins giving an incredibly rousing speech, reminding us of all the heroes who gave their lives so that the Great Spirit might live, and reminding us too that there will be those whose names we will never know who were instrumental in making the world a better place. But then something weird starts to happen. The air grows cold, there's a howling breeze, and everything just feels wrong. And then all of a sudden, look up in the sky! It's a bird! It's a plane! It's the Mask of Shadows! You guys remember the depressed praying mantis who told Gali not to wake up the Great Spirit and to run for her fucking life? The Bugman was right! And then an all-too-familiar voice reverberates throughout the land. The voice of Spooky Ghost Man! Bazinga! I know I keep saying that shit's about to get real. It never gets any less real, does it? I think we might have to chalk this one up to a big ol' oopsie, gang. So Makuta has taken over the Great Spirit Robot. Spooky Ghost Man got his spooky ghost self into the centroid of the mechanism and cast out the Great Spirit. Tahu's of course the first to be like, I'll kick your ass, Shadow Man! What, are you just going to go around kicking rocks? I am the very ground you walk on, you punk bitch! Enjoy your last few moments of peace, cause y'all are about to get your shit rocked. So, yeah, that's how the 2008 story ends. Absolutely fucked up. We just kept getting hit with plot twists in 2008, didn't we? The Makuta are a species, the Borok are Matoran, the Matoran universe is a giant robot. And now Pterodax has just yoinked himself the most powerful position in the entire universe, because he is the universe! And there's more. There's more coming. But alright, now that Pterodax is in charge, what happened to Mata Nui? Well, God, imagine dropping back into the story now. Mata Nui has ceased to be in charge of the Great Spirit robot. He's been usurped by Spooky Ghost Man. So what does that mean for the Great Spirit? If you'll remember a few episodes ago, when Ignika, the Toa of Life, gave his life to save the Great Spirit's life, Gali saw a bunch of weird energy pass into the Mask of Life. The explanations I have to give are sometimes just a mouthful. That energy was the Great Spirit himself. He has now been trapped in the Mask of Life and shot into space. But as he's hurtling through space, something very rudely throws off his groove. That something is another planet. And you know what comes next? Fucking aliens! And not just any aliens, this is the species of the Great Beings. The dudes who created the Matoran universe. And crazily enough, this planet is literally right next door. Remember when I said it doesn't get any less weird? I stand by that. It's gonna be a lot. It's gonna be a lot. It's time for another recap! Let's go! When we left off, the good guys had just defeated the Spooky Ghost Man, and everything seemed hunky-dory for about a microsecond. But things immediately got worse. God is dying, so an old man sends 6 brave heroes to get a mask. But they unfortunately get the crap beat out of them by a bunch of gangster gorillas that floss at least twice a day. A team of strapping young lads is sent out to find them. They journey through literal hell and then get tased by a celestial body, turning them into roided up lightning motherfuckers. Meanwhile, our heroes have regained their powers and return to the fight, only to get one-shotted by this guy. Eventually, these guys arrive to save the day and beat the shit out of the Colgate crew. They're then forced to fight this guy who's guarding the Mask of Life. He's riding a giant spider that eventually turns into a dragon. The mask has a mind of its own and seems to really take a liking to this dude in particular. However, once they win the fight against the spider, the dragon, and the man, the mask says, "Catch me if you can," and jumps into the ocean. They follow the mask down into the depths, which then decides to turn them into much less OP, water-breathing versions of themselves. They also have to fight a bunch of disgraced warlords that tried to kill God once. They also have to contend with a very angry zombie ninja who has no idea what's going on ever. In addition to the most jumbo shrimp imaginable, they are also joined by Spooky Ghost Man! He doesn't look like this though, he's trapped in a robot suit. But he's on the good side this time because he also doesn't want God to die. Well, kind of anyway, it's complicated. Unfortunately, they face so many obstacles that the whole saving God thing doesn't really work out at first. But then the goodest boy, aka Bionicle Jesus, sacrifices himself to save the entire world, or so he thinks. Meanwhile, our other troop of heroes gets a really weird shopping list from a lumberjack with a lie detector on his face. They then go to the god of making stuff who's like, alright. And the DM decides that they get to level up, after which they are once again forced to fight bugs, kind of. As it turns out, there's more than one Spooky Ghost Man, but not for long! Additionally, we get answers we didn't want to questions we didn't initially ask. Then the Mask of Life decides to do something that it should have done way earlier. Actually do something. Once shit gets really down to the wire, our heroes tell this guy, hey, we kinda need you to, not be a person anymore so that the universe can live. So that happens. Meanwhile, the 7th member of the hero team that they left behind in the big city gets the bad suck. He is then shown the distant past by a slug. He then gets convinced by an old blue lady and this guy, who's kind of a good guy now maybe, to go jump through a bunch of portals. After seeing a universe where God is dead and accidentally toppling a fascist apartheid regime, he finally arrives at the battle where he's supposed to be. And he helps! That's really all I have to say about that. After Lifeboy dies to become a giant defibrillator, all of the Spooky Ghost Men get eviscerated by Hurricane Tortilla. But God's alive again! Yay! Well, so our heroes all return to the big city to celebrate their victory. But then the sky darkens and the stars rearrange themselves into the shape of Spooky Ghost Man! And now God is drifting through space and he's about to spend some time hanging out with a bunch of aliens. Oh, also, everything takes place inside a giant robot. Anyway, that's what you missed on Glee!